taken to ensure that larger and medium-sized businesses can also access the credit they need. I'm also announcing today further cash flow support through the cash tax system. To help businesses pay people and keep them in work, I'm deferring the next quarter of VAT payments. That means no business will pay any VAT from now until the end of June, and you'll have until the end of the financial year to repay those bills. That is a direct injection of over £30 billion of cash to businesses, equivalent to 1.5% of GDP. Let me speak directly to businesses. I know it's incredibly difficult out there. We in government are doing everything we can to support you. We're paying people's wages up to 80% so someone can be furloughed rather than laid off to protect their jobs. We're deferring over £30 billion of taxes until the end of the financial year. We're lending unlimited sums of money, interest-free, for 12 months. We're abolishing business rates altogether this year if you're in hospitality, retail and leisure. We're providing cash grants of £25,000.
Can you talk?
Yes. Hello.
Good.
To stand behind you, and I am asking you to do your best to stand behind our workers. We are launching in the coming days a major national advertising campaign to communicate the available business support for businesses and people. Please look very carefully at that support before making any decisions to lay people off. It's on all of us. We are starting a great national effort to protect jobs. But the truth is, we are already seeing job losses, and there may be more to come. I cannot promise you that no one will face hardship in the weeks ahead. So we will also act to protect you if the worst happens. To strengthen the safety net, I'm increasing today the universal credit standard allowance for the next 12 months by £1,000 a year. For the next 12 months, I'm increasing the working tax credit basic element by the same amount as well. Together, these measures will benefit over 4 million of our most vulnerable households. And I'm strengthening the safety net for self-employed people too, by suspending the minimum income floor for everyone affected by the economic impacts of coronavirus. That means self-employed people can now access in full universal credit at a rate equivalent to statutory sick pay for employees. Taken together, I'm announcing nearly £7 billion of extra support through the welfare system to strengthen the safety net and protect people's incomes. And to support the self-employed through the tax system, I'm also announcing today that the next self-assessment payments will be deferred to January 2021. As well as keeping people in work and supporting those who lose their jobs or work for themselves, our plan for jobs and incomes will help keep a roof over your head. We've acted already to make sure homeowners can get a 3-month mortgage holiday if they need it. I'm announcing today nearly £1 billion of support for renters by increasing the generosity of housing benefit and universal credit so that the local housing allowance will cover at least 30% of market rents in your area. The actions I have taken today represent an unprecedented economic intervention to support the jobs and incomes of the British people. A new comprehensive job retention scheme and a significantly strengthened safety net. Unprecedented measures for unprecedented times. Let me close with one final observation. Now more than at any time in our history, we will be judged by our capacity for compassion. Our ability to come through this won't just be down to what government or businesses do, but by the individual acts of kindness that we show each other. The small business who does everything they can not to lay off their staff. The student who does a shop for their elderly neighbour. The retired nurse who volunteers to cover some shifts in their local hospital. When this is over, and it will be over, we want to look back on this moment and remember the many small acts of kindness done by us and to us. We want to look back on this time and remember how we thought first of others and acted with decency. We want to look back on this time and remember how, in the face of a generation-defining moment, we undertook a collective national effort and we stood together. It's on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rishi. Jenny, is there anything you want to say at this stage? Okay, well, perhaps you can help us field any questions from the scientific and medical point of view as they come. Can I go first to Alex Forsyth from the BBC?
Prime Minister, thank you very much. The measures you've announced today will have a significant impact, not just on business, of course, but on people's lives. Can you tell us what has changed that's made you introduce these measures now? How long, if you can, do you see these measures lasting, and how do you plan to enforce them? And Chancellor, if I may, you talk about unprecedented measures that you're taking. How can you be sure that the tax and welfare system can cope to ensure that this support goes to those people who need it and need it quickly? Thank you.
Thanks. Well, Alex, what we're doing today is really enforcing what we set out in the fourth part of our advice on Monday. I think people made a huge effort in the last 4 or 5 days to comply. We saw big reductions in people attending some pubs, a lot of pubs across the country. A lot of effort was made by people to reduce unnecessary social contact, as we said. But it was becoming clear that in order to drive that curve down, to reduce the unnecessary social gatherings by 75%, which is what the science tells us we need to do to have an impact on that curve, then we need now to be making it absolutely clear that we're going to enforce these closures. And so that's the pubs, bars, clubs, and so on that I mentioned, in addition to gyms, leisure centres, and so on. Now, how are we going to enforce it? Well, clearly there are licensing arrangements that will make it, I think, relatively simple to do, should that really be necessary. I think in reality, and we will enforce it strictly, but in reality, I think everybody can see the imperative of doing what is necessary, of protecting our NHS and saving lives. Rishi.
Alex, you're absolutely right to ask the question. I think when I was here earlier, I said it's all very well. It's easy for me to stand here and announce things, but I want to make sure that the help I'm announcing can get to the people that we want to benefit from it. And so that's why, as we've thought about what we're doing, there are various ways you can design job support schemes, and there are various ways that we can get extra money into our welfare system to strengthen the safety net. We have deliberately focused on scheme design and particular policies that we know are easy to operationalize quickly. And there are many ideas that people have about how to do all these things, and we've been looking through all of them. But I would put on record my thanks to the staff at HMRC and the Department for Work and Pensions. They themselves will be under enormous operating pressure over the coming weeks and months, like all of us and every business. So as I said, we specifically designed this scheme to work in a way that minimises the operational complexity. And similarly, with the welfare interventions that we've made, we have deliberately picked those that are absolutely the easiest and most straightforward and require the least manual intervention.
And save because there aren't enough ventilators, and also it's obviously Mother's Day this Sunday. Are you urging people to stay away from their mothers, and will you be seeing yours? Thank you.
On the first question about clinical judgments, doctors in the NHS, clinicians in the NHS already make very difficult judgments.
to where are we going? There we go.
Sounds like someone's masturbating.
So, are we live? I think we're live.
Right.
We're running. We're live.
Good evening and welcome to the New Athens live stream here in the bunker in Regent's Park. We have with us tonight Dan Kulupski, historian out of the LSE, provenance Odessa in Ukraine and Little Odessa in Brooklyn. Dan's a historian of Napoleon III and the Great Wars of Succession, and he's producing a documentary with us on the history of Odessa, which we're going to be filming soon. So welcome, Dan, and good to see you. Also, we have with us Oliver Nelken, who is our producer from Mornington Media, who provided this wonderful studio and all the tech and skill that goes into the production of a live stream like this. So yes, Dan, it's certainly exciting times, as the Chinese would say. We live in interesting times. What are our insights tonight? Well, we're going to have universal basic income in this country. How do you see that working?
Yeah, I was speaking with my friend about this, and he kind of sold me universal basic income. At first, I thought it's just going to make everything more expensive. But then he realized that not everyone's going to use their universal basic income, only the people that need it. Yeah. So yeah, that's gonna be interesting. I think it's gonna do a lot. It's how what are you worried about in terms of how they're gonna fund it? What are you worried about in terms of how?
So Andrew Yang, until I think it was last week, was running for the Democratic primary ticket to run for US president on the basis of a policy of universal basic income, which really wasn't a term that was well known in the political mainstream until his candidacy. He's now resigned from that race, and I think, as you say, give his delegates to Bernie Sanders, although that candidacy isn't really going anywhere now that the Democratic Party have kind of allied behind Biden. But yeah, I mean, he was putting that policy forward as something Americans could achieve, $1,000 a month income for everyone. Now we're going to institute it in this country. Off the back of that, I'm sure Dominic Cummings has been watching.
What if the state covered your cost of living?
But the
rise of universal basic income. I mean, they had a referendum on it recently in Switzerland, which I
was gonna say. I mean, UBI is not that new. This referendum was like 2 years ago or something.
Yeah. I mean, it was quite close, but in the end, they didn't pass it.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a lot of direct democracy in Switzerland, and they're very keen on plebiscites. I mean, we're only just getting used to it ourselves in the past couple of years, but they've been doing it.
Yeah, people talk about the British democracy. They often overlook the Swiss system. I mean, they don't even have like a head of state. There's like all these, like, their cabinet is rotating, I think, every year.
Yes. I mean, it's like ancient Athens, really. I mean, they've got a really strong direct democracy there. And of course, they're extremely rich, so and totally unconquerable. So as has been proven over centuries. So
it's not that they're totally people just don't invade them, don't bother to.
Yes, I mean they were mercenaries for a long time, and then they paid everyone off to really stick.
Yeah, I find it a bit sinister that the mercenaries are now the bankers of the world. And you just can't trust the Swiss. I mean, they could live everywhere in the EU, but I don't think it works the other way around.
Yes. I think they have a strong sense of of nation, and that's why they haven't joined.
That's,
even though
that's
they're
what I want to get.
locked in, locked, are on all sides by EU nations now. No, so they had an experiment with universal basic income in that campaign. Now, because of the lockdowns that we're seeing across Europe, really the consumer economy is going to burn off like a McMansion in California in a forest fire. What we're going to see is the total collapse of all non-essential services, all consumer business, and really pare the economy back down to the bare bones. And I've been asking around, what people want to talk about on here, and the one topic that is on everyone's lips is, what is the economy going to be like after Corona?
Oh man, I read Small is Beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great if I think it was Schumacher. Chuck Schumacher.
Yes.
Yeah. If his ideas can come through, well, if we start discussing these ideas, at least, right? He doesn't propose anything. He just outlines the problem. And the problem which he outlines is that we have a completely wrong value system in the economy. We look at things like GDP per capita, all these measurements, which are not a really objective measure of quality of life. So one argument he made, and he wrote the book in the 70s, is like the Americans can easily buy most of Europe's art by a good price. They can afford to do that, but Europeans are never going to sell it off like that. And so the point is that money is not a good measure of actually how the economy is performing. And the other issue was that our addiction to fossil fuels because of our industrial production. So that's what's changed now, right? China stopped producing, trade has been reduced, and all of a sudden you see like pollution is just like, like clearing up, and this has been amazing for the environment. So if they could just not, if they could, when the economy starts reflating, if they could just like make sure that the environmental issues are tackled, I think there's an opportunity to actually to deal with that, which is interesting.
I mean, you came across an interesting point there. The consumer economy, is the kind of powerhouse that people don't know how to wean ourselves off. And with the economic crisis that's come about due to this disease, you've seen that China's economy has really taken a hit because of the reliability of their production. In 1971, I think is the key moment when this economic system came to pass, when
China's opening up.
Yeah, when Kissinger brought Nixon to China. Now, this wasn't Nixon's deal; it was Kissinger's deal with Chairman Mao. And their notion was, hey, look, the people in the West are kind of annoying. They have unions and civil liberties and all these awkward things like wanting good pay for their labor, and wanting to have democracy and so on, which will impact on profit. And so
you're right. I mean, 70, 71, 72, they're the key moments for the nature of our global economy as it is. I mean, you could say that globalization, kind of the way we know it, starts there.
And it's not something
China
that's
opens
really
up, and the other big thing is the suspension of the gold standard.
Yes, and all the
which 72, and the free floating dollar, where it just became gold in itself.
Yes. So I mean, certainly the sort of Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency narrative really starts with the leaving the gold standard. But what we don't hear about within that structure, within that narrative, is this 1971 meeting of minds between Kissinger and Mao, where they divided up the world. Essentially, the idea being that the Soviet Union was going to collapse.
No, I mean,
or at least it was America's geostrategic interest to separate Russia and China,
for sure.
so that China would come on side and Russia would wither without its ally. Now, and although there were tensions between them throughout the 20th century, there was a broad coalition. Now, that's what's on the front page of all the history books when it comes to this period. But actually, the real story is in the economics, is in how corporations moved their production out of the West and into China, which is cheaper. They can then re-import the products to the West, siphon off the consumer money, and then by working with the Chinese who are producing it, the corporations and the corporate class can then abstract those profits and not have to repatriate the money back into the US, back into Europe, back into Britain, but instead can divvy it up with the Chinese with whom they're working, and profit that way. And so then you have this denuding of the Western economy where we don't make anything anymore. I think this was most evident in the past week with face masks. So all of the face masks are produced in factories in China, and that includes the US military, that includes the NHS. They all get their I-95 standard face masks from China. They're manufactured there. We don't make them ourselves. And, that's fine when you are in a globalized, stable economy where your money has value. Currently unavailable, there we go. The corollary of that is that, when you've got your requisition, you've got your order book for I-95 masks, whether you're a hospital, whether you're requisitioning for a government or a military, and unless you have a stockpile, that order book's going to be left because the Chinese government has requisitioned all of the masks that are being manufactured for China. So your international global trade system breaks down because your money's not worth anything anymore. There's a national interest that overtops what your money is worth, because China has no interest in letting its own people suffer while getting some cash from Western nations who want masks they've ordered. So this is sort of a really at the bleeding edge example that we can see of the globalized trade system just breaking down completely, and the consequences of that are going to be massive. How would you see that proceeding?
I mean, yeah, we've got a president in the United States, which it seems like what he's proposing is autarky or definitely some kind of limitation of global trade in America's interests, in America's favor. He's worried about the current account balance and so on. So yeah, he's once this crisis cools off and all the trade networks are they kind of come to a standstill, he has the option essentially to keep it that way. So yeah, we don't know. And he's got bargaining power, probably. So once this crisis is done and the economy begins to reflate, it's unlikely that they're gonna start importing everything from China again, because they would have established some kind of patterns.
Yes.
Substituted, and so they're going to be in a much stronger position to get what they want.
Yeah, I mean, even in a single week before this crisis last year, I saw there were Trump made 2 trips to Texas. One was to begin the movement from Tim Apple of Foxconn manufacturing of Apple's products, iPhones and so on, back to the United States. And the other, in the same week, was he was in Texas with Bernard Arnault to open a fine-tooled leatherworking factory in Texas for for LVMH, for Louis Vuitton, like handbags. And so this notion is that, well, if you don't make it in America, you can't sell it there. And this great wall of tariffs that Trump is building means that, whether it's cars, whether it's whether it's luxury goods, whether it's smartphones, if you don't manufacture it in America, he's going to make it so expensive to import it, and that's going to be passed on to the consumer that they really things can't be manufactured and then sold into this massive consumer marketplace of America, and hence the USMCA, his new trade deal in Canada and in Mexico. When he's got rid of NAFTA.
Philip, first off, has said if Russia disappeared, you'd have no oxygen. And financial crises are a Western invention. What do you think about that?
That's interesting, isn't it?
It is, I guess. Finance is a Western invention. So typically, all the side effects of it, knock-on effects come from the West. I mean, yeah, it's a thing. It's true. Americans don't pay their mortgages, and then the Greeks go, have to live without power.
Yes. No, I mean we're seeing a massive realignment, like day by day geopolitically. Trump went to India a couple of weeks ago during this crisis, and essentially has replaced China now with India. He had this great rally, Namaste Trump, where Modi set out a stall for, hey, bring all the factories to India. India will be in your sphere of influence. And similarly, with Brexit replacing the EU with Britain in terms of where America's looking to partner with. Now, these moves are things that would decades before would have called wars. Would have led to global conflict. But now they can happen week to week and nobody even notices.
It's because they have nuclear arsenals. These countries, they don't want to go to war with each other. And B, they're so interdependent. It's a bit more subtle how they maneuver.
Tell us about the geopolitical schema you were talking about with Ukraine.
Mackinder?
Yes, tell me about Mackinder.
Mackinder's kind of like the father of geopolitical theory in some ways, because he was one of the guys that was pushing to make geography a separate discipline, rather than whatever it was part of. And he essentially conceptualized this notion of heartland.
Yeah.
Ali, can you get up a thing called heartland, sort of, yeah. And he splits the world up into these zones.
Mackinder, M-C-K-I-N-D.
Yeah. And the idea is that where Russia is, so former Soviet Union, that region is basically the heartland, because it's big and it has natural barriers defending it everywhere apart from Eastern Europe.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the Achilles heel.
Because it crosses the Urals and actually the European Russia.
Yeah, so it's just the European plain.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So take us through this, because this is kind of when was this? This was like early 20th century?
Yeah.
And he was American?
No, he was British.
He was British. Okay.
But the other American guy was Alfred Thayer Mahan.
Yes.
Who conceptualized sea power, and Mackinder conceptualized land power.
Okay, so let's go through this map. So I see pivot area as Russia and most of Europe.
So that pivot area, also known as the heartland, whoever controls the heartland controls Eurasia, and then who controls Eurasia controls the world. So that was his idea, is that Russia was destined, due to geographical determinism, to rule the world, in his opinion, because it controls the heartland. At the time Mackinder was writing about this, the Russian economy was booming, actually. But then World War I happened, and the heartland imploded and metamorphed from the Russian Empire into the Soviet Union. and ultimately, again, the Soviet Union regained control, and it was victorious over Nazi Germany. And the Americans, there was a guy called Nicholas Spikeman who was Dutch, but the Americans kind of built on this idea that you got to contain the heartland.
Okay.
And the point is
we see America taking bites out of the various republics after the fall of the Iron Curtain, taking Poland, moving towards Ukraine, and certainly the way I learned it was that Russia would never stand the notion that the port, it's one warm water port at Sevastopol, which it rented from Ukraine, could host an American fleet, and that really was the flashpoint that led to the annexation of the Crimea in 2014, because it was looking like Ukraine could go either west or east, and it was becoming as we see with Burisma and so on as well, it was becoming a field where people were acting in geopolitically internationally, and the Americans were moving into it, and so you can see why with this theory, with this Mackinder
it's all
theory.
tied. I mean, Mackinder's he was a Darwinian, social Darwinian, so it was a bit. Race came into a lot of his theories, and Hitler, obviously a big fan of. If you get the way Hitler thought, then you kind of get the way geopolitics was conceptualized in the early 20th century. So you got to have your Lebensraum.
Yeah.
Nation's got to have resources. It wants to be autarkic. It needs to control everything. It needs, but we live in a world where America is like a global empire. It has its network of alliances in Europe, Japan, and for the United States, I think what they don't want is anyone in the Pacific Ocean, right?
Yes,
that's theirs.
Yeah,
and they want because that's kind of where they did so well in the war. Like the Japanese bombed Hawaii. It's hard to get to America. They're the only industrialized power in the neighborhood. Well, the Japanese have to deal with the Chinese, and the Russians have to deal with the Germans. I mean, Europe is just always historically there's been so much infighting rather than in China, which has been a united civilization, attracting others into its gravitational field.
As with One Belt, One Road, you can see that.
Yeah,
now.
And but they're fucked with that. Honestly, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, think about it. They've invested all this money into Pakistan, Africa. They're never going to make a profit on that. They just dumped it. Now the economy came at a standstill, and I don't know. They just spent trillions. I think it was like $1 trillion on non-performing investments, essentially. So yeah, I don't know. I think the point is that they're going to build this road or a port. Sri Lanka can't afford to pay it back. Then they take it over and have a network of bases and just basically control assets. But when you have a state-run bank, right, which makes decisions not based on profit, it's not going to be a good bank. It's going to be like the Soviet economy. At some point, you're going to see issues like
So we're seeing, on that note, more command economy in the West now. There's more geopolitical sense that there will be coordination of like state interests, banking interests, business interests. Nations are going to try and build themselves again, rather than relying on this sort of globalized layer of capital that can then trade with frictionlessly between empires.
It depends. I mean, it depends regions. how it works, because why does America rule the world? Well, we're kind of seeing the post 1945 legacy dwindle. Right, they drop a few bombs on Japan, and it's the only power to use atomic weapons, which basically says like we are God. And the Soviet Union, had the weapons, tried to resist them, but imploded ultimately because of their weak economy and incorrect structure. So America managed to build a global system like the British did, because the world needed them. The Americans, by buying European goods or by buying Chinese goods since the 70s, what happened is essentially they reflate the world. They help out the world by spending their dollars everywhere.
Yeah.
So it really depends on how bad Europe and China are going to be hit by this, and how America will recover. So if America could easily reestablish like this globalist system, if they recover easily from the crisis, and then they want to again start buying things from abroad. But if Trump wants to rearrange that whole mechanic, wants to basically frustrate international trade and wants everything to be internalized, then yeah, we're gonna see a big step back for the globalized world order.
Yeah, and these magnitudes of shifts would be beyond, until now, would be beyond the capacity of a single 8-year presidency in America, would have been beyond the British government and certainly the EU, because it kind of stops itself from doing things very actively. But no, now you can see like massive change, massive global shifts in an instant, and kind of nobody's watching. I mean, you can see martial law across Europe suddenly coming into play in Italy, in France, within days, hours even, with little opposition. I mean, the Gilets jaunes were out for their 70th Saturday, and they were permitted by Macron to protest in Paris, because I think probably because they would have risen in revolution if they were not allowed to protest, they were not permitted to protest. But apart from the Gilets jaunes in Paris, doing one more march, there's really we've had videos out of France of the CRS jackbooting civilians in the street for not carrying the correct papers, and we've seen attempted lockdown in Italy, which actually massively failed in Lombardy, because what you get on continental Europe is this sort of memory of fascism. So Italy, they have the legal levers, they have the levers to lock down civilian population. Firstly in cultural terms, because people will remember fascism, they remember the carabinieri with pistols on street corners saying, demanding your papers, and also presumably the legal frameworks are still in on the statute book, which can then be revived, and you can see this in various European nations, and in France perhaps similarly. It's always been a very dirigiste state, centralized state in France, and civil liberties haven't really been.
I mean, that's the whole point of the European Union. They gotta understand the legal system was created by Napoleon. Like, let's get real. This guy conquered Europe. He creates a legal system. It's easy to administer. It's not. It's like positive rights, I think.
Yes, positive rights rather than negative,
and it's
rights.
collective
You're allowed
rights
to do something.
Yeah,
like joint stock companies. There was a time when to set up a project, you would have to apply to the king for a charter to form your joint stock company, whether it's the Darien Company creating a Scottish colony in Panama, which imploded the Scottish economy in 1707, and that led to the Act of Union with England. You'd have to apply to the crown to be able to do something. And this was now we've got this notion of negative rights in Britain and America. We've recovered our notions of common law, and that may be a reason why it's harder to have lockdown in this country, and especially in America with the Second Amendment.
In America it's probably hard to enforce it, but they could do it here. I think they just don't want to. There's probably I mean, what I read was that they're using models based on behavioral economics.
Yes. Oh,
So-
nudge theory and so on.
Yeah.
Yes. I've been following this.
And I don't know, maybe it makes sense. Who the hell knows? Now they're closing it down. Maybe they didn't want to do it too quickly, too soon, but
Yes, it depends what the motivations are.
I think the real reason was that if you see people raiding the supermarkets, the British people shouldn't be allowed to panic. Slowly, kind of like gradually get, gradually get to the state of martial law, just to make sure that, I mean, it's an island, the logistics of supplying the food and making sure everybody has stuff, it could have been a complete infrastructural collapse. It could have been, yeah. I think that's the logic behind it, was that we can't have panic. We can't have like some shock to the system where a fucking island, is going to be complicated. And that's why they were open for so long, I think, as well. There's no other way of getting in and out.
Yes, I mean, that we knew about this problem when it emerged from China, and there were no closures of borders, no screening at airports, no quarantining of people entering the country. And now it's in the country. You can't. Cordon sanitaire is how they prevented Ebola from spreading in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's the classical model.
Yeah, but it's not
of isolating a territory, preventing anybody from entering or leaving, posting armed guards at the exits, and treating the afflicted inside, but making sure the disease doesn't spread outside that cordon sanitaire, outside that wall. And of course, but once it's in a nation, once it's come into airports and percolated through a nation like Britain, there's no way to achieve that. That could have been achieved to begin with. But now we're seeing, as you say, these sort of incremental steps towards a martial law setup. And what's the motivation? You're saying it could be step by step to keep calm. There's an economic sense that you don't want to spook the markets. They don't want to have lose too much profit too early. And there's also there's kind of a
well, they don't want the NHS also to be over what's it called? Overcapacitated, yeah.
No, so what's the motivation? Is it to govern by consent? Now, okay, so there's a command, shut down restaurants, bars, and so on. Today, that comes today. Where does that come from? Because if we're governing by consent, and this is a consensual shutdown,
because it's
then
in our
do we
interest.
need to shut down the restaurants? Surely we can just let them lose their custom. Now, okay, there's an issue with insurance here that's been flagged up in
interests, and the government sometimes has the ability to impose martial law as long as it's within the interests of the people they govern. It clearly is. We're stubborn as a populace. We're a sheep that needs a shepherd, and the flock might get lost, so on. So the idea is that they're taking measures to ensure that we're healthy, and that minimum casualties will take place. I don't know how competently they're doing it, but that's kind of where they have the legitimacy to impose martial law or close down restaurants and so on. Yeah.
So, So the watchword on everyone's lips tonight seems to be, what will the economy look like after this? And I think there's the narrative that stands behind the whole 21st century so far is this undermining of the concept of money. And we plotted the start of this period in 1971 with the Bretton Woods and with the China Kissinger deal. But then coming forward, that central bank system, that central bank debt note dominated petrodollar system that we've seen, with then globalized international trade sitting on top of that, ticked along for some decades, without really any opposition. So in the 90s, Francis Fukuyama wrote The End of History, and his notion was that really neoliberal globalized capitalist democracy is what's going to happen from here until Judgment Day. And we don't need to talk about history anymore because there's not going to be any global conflict. Of course, he wrote this like ironically just before 9/11, which defined the first decade of the 21st century, not his End of History like trading
90s triumphalism.
Yes, so we had that kind of moment, and then the whole the whole terror in the Middle East of Bushism and of interventionism destroying the Middle East, and then we arrive at 2008. And then the money really comes back because we have the banking crisis, and the democratic response to that is Bitcoin, the blockchain, the crypto revolution. We can create our own internet money that's fair and democratic. That's sort of one stream that comes out of that and grows. But what we really see in global terms is the banks got bailed out. They added zeros, quantitative easing the money supply. Just add some zeros until the bad debt that the cheating banks have accrued to themselves goes away. Just add zeros until it goes away. And people saw that and then were whirled around in the financial crisis. But that really stuck. I mean, so for Bitcoin, there was actually a solution project that happened in response to that. The people saw that there was that there was something amiss, that the banks can get bailed out without any trouble, and the people don't. They get foreclosed on their homes, they lose their jobs, the more jobs flee to China and so on. Now, we get 12 years on today, and with the elections we've just had and the kind of new nationalism that we're seeing, which was occurring even before this sudden acceleration with the universal basic income and so on, that we've seen in the past day, that this concept of money has been undermined. So that the first knock it had, that some people woke up from the matrix and unplugged themselves and came out of little pods, was the Bitcoin revolution. That was kind of the little matrix guys, coming out and unsealing themselves from being farmed. And then, but it also destabilized the general concept. Once people had got themselves back on their feet after the financial crisis, you started to see people waking up and saying, well, what is money? Where is value coming from? Because it's clearly not defined by dollars, because you can add as many dollars and pounds as you want with adding zeros to the economy, adding to the money supply until you balance your books.
This is like with anything. The value behind money is the same value behind Bitcoin or any asset. It's the confidence and it's the trust we put in it. It's just that we just trust the United States government. We ultimately like to use it as a medium of exchange. So it's basically that. It's this weird inertia, the superstition. That's the value behind any money.
It's hoodoo voodoo.
It is. It is. It's just it's complete. Even if we had gold, what's the value behind gold? I mean, you could use it as aluminium for wiring. That's probably the only use you have. But the jewelry and the shiny stuff.
Oh yeah, you can use it in tech. You can use it in tech, and it's very important in tech.
Yeah.
As practical use. Also, it doesn't degrade. I mean, the point of gold is that it doesn't oxidize. Oxygen doesn't destroy it.
But I mean, why not use cocaine as as a currency? I mean, that gives you pleasure,
Yes. But the use value of the currency in other terms than as a store of value
and a medium of exchange
and unit of account is not why we use the money. It's not why there's a standard. The standard, gold standard, Bitcoin standard, petrodollar standard concept. It's not there because you can use the money for something else that's not money. You can derive it back into trade goods. And that's where clipping coins came from, and the whole idea of face value. And Isaac Newton hanging men for clipping coins when he became the kind of tyrannical governor of the Bank of England.
That's hilarious.
Because of course if you take the gold off the coin, you clip the edge of the coin, then the gold sliver you get off the coin is worth more than the whole face value of the coin in the economy. Of course, this then very excitingly comes back to Gaddafi and his last gasp, which was this gold standard. He wanted to create a new gold standard, and that's why he was killed. He created a new dinar, and the dinar is very clever because it's both a weight in gold and a coin. So you can't clip it; it won't weigh enough. So the dinar, being both a unit of weight measure and a unit of currency, kind of click together in this way, so that you can prevent that kind of corruption of the money system. And he was trying to take this to the African Union and take it to OPEC to trade oil. So essentially he was trading oil and gold. He went. Just a few years beforehand, Saddam Hussein had been trading oil in euros. He went. Like when you have challenges to that, petrodollar, US Federal Reserve system, then that's when countries become rogue states and they're destroyed. Philip Firsov, one of our artists who we're making a documentary with at the moment, was in Bucharest at the Great Palace of Ceausescu in Romania, and heard from there that Ceausescu was creating a Axis powers international finance bank, and that instead of it being an internal struggle about ruling Romania that killed him, it was the fact he was trying to capitalize, whether it be Mugabe, whether it be Idi Amin, whether it be North Korea, all of these Axis powers to fund themselves outside of the IMF, outside of the international monetary system. And so you can plot these three regimes which fell because they challenged the petrodollar, US federal bank hegemony. Ceausescu in Romania.
You don't do that.
Then
you pay your taxes and you don't challenge America's financial hegemony. That's just the way it is. And that's why Al Capone went to prison, because he didn't pay his taxes. Who gives a shit about how many people he killed or any of those things? Pay your motherfucking taxes. It's just what it is.
So, but now, today, we're seeing a total disruption of that settled system, which caused the fall of all of those leaders, all those states, all of those empires. And so now, we're having today universal basic income in Britain. So what that shows on this money concept is, okay, so we could recapitalize the banks with quantitative easing, but it's not for the people. It's for the banking class. Like they're the ones who can have bad debt and get their copybook wiped clean by the central bank, but not the people. And so you can see with this latest round of elections in Britain and America, big infrastructure bills, a new social contract with regard to jobs and investment in the people long term, new coalitions forming politically that are beyond left and right, because classical rightist and leftist parties don't appeal to the same kinds of constituents they did before. And so you see something like Dominic Cummings' victory in the north of England, which was an old Labour stronghold. Now, there are very few Labour MPs left in the north of England, because there was an offering made by the Westminster political class to the north of England to back a new investment in industry, in manufacturing in Britain. Same with the Rust Belt in America. You're seeing this US-China system breakdown, as we've been examining. But then universal basic income is kind of the last nail in the coffin, because it shows that the money is fiction. It's all fiction. You can just give it to people, and it's almost like they haven't really war gamed, really thought out what the benefits of universal basic income can be. It's almost as if the idea is that, well, we'll just give someone $1,000 and hopefully they'll spend it back into the consumer economy, like going to Costa or Pret, and then keeping some consumer stuff going. Whereas actually there's going to be a massive realignment and a massive reassessment of what is really necessary. Like, we know loo roll is necessary. We know that, hand sanitizer is necessary. We know that pasta is necessary. And we know that doctors and respirators are necessary, and some basic logistics. But what else? What else will form that economy?
Ergodic.
Ergodicity. Ergodicity. What is ergodicity?
What is
Ollie?
ergodicity?
I don't know. Let's find out.
That is the next subject.
Ergodicity is something to do with Erdogan? No. The ensemble average equals the time average.
Probability theory.
In probability theory, an ergodic system is a stochastic process which proceeds in time and which has the same statistical behavior averaged over time as over the system's entire possible state space. Modern formal statement of ergodicity relies heavily on measure theory. Okay, so like one thing defines another. What's the context?
We've just got a new, someone commented called ergodic equilibrium. He says, all done and dusted in 3 months.
Okay. In terms of the disease, perhaps he's talking about it because.
All right, yeah, I might take a seat. Press 1 and 2.
Right. I'm 2. He's 1.
All right.
So
let's talk about ergodic theory. No, go on.
So no, tell me what have you been your impressions of the corona? You've been on my mind. It's like a postillon song.
Yeah, the box with the red button.
Yeah, there we go.
I look like an emo. That's my main problem at the moment. What was the question? Sorry, the question is,
what have been your key impressions of the corona scenario?
Well, it's sort of like fear breeds fear and panic breeds panic. And it could, so I don't want to say it could be a lot worse than it seems, but it's all unprecedented. These are all cliches that we've heard 100 times. I don't have anything useful to say, basically. So I think it's better to say nothing if you've got nothing useful to say. As in, yeah, apart from wash your hands, what can you say? I mean, no, it's good. It's good to try and figure out what is going on and discuss what's going on. But me personally, I don't have the verbal dexterity to wax lyrical for too long about it without going down a rabbit hole of flaring up the situation. Do you know what I mean?
I see. So, what do you think? I mean, so all of our viewers are really interested to hear, what do we think will the economy look like after the dust settles? So there won't be any more Costa. There won't be any more corner stores. Well, there might be sort of inconvenience stores, but there won't be, this consumer economy of businesses, large and small, that don't have like big capital reserves, big cash reserves to keep them going. The government is trying to buoy them up with various stimulus packages. But
well, yeah, it's so a sandwich isn't worth £5.
Yes,
never has been. It's only worth £5 in the vicinity of people who've got enough money to not care about £5 for a sandwich. So if the new currency is toilet paper and pasta,
yes,
which people are rushing to buy, then if confidence it's all about where confidence lies. And have we ever needed sandwiches that conveniently? Have we ever needed that number of different types of sandwiches? Costa and Pret and stuff. It's like, you've ever worked in an office and you go to get some lunch and people like talk about the sandwich selection. It's like that is unnecessary. That's an unnecessary conversation. It's just because you've got nothing to talk about. So you could either not go through like the whole social kind of
like pantomime of working in office and talking about sandwich selection. That's an unnecessary thing that is perhaps enabled by money being the do you know what I mean?
So yeah, I mean this notion of universal basic income, I think it needs to be kind of thought out, because clearly governments didn't anticipate this new move back to industry, this new move back to manufacturing that people clearly want in the West. They want to be making things and doing things for ourselves again, rather than having this kind of consumerist economy which sits on top of things being made like a long way away in China. And so clearly there hasn't been thought through at the kind of strategic level what is consumerism. Well, it's like taking some of this cash and then spreading it around, and instead of giving people real purpose in life, it's almost saying, look, we want to keep this, keep the CPR going on this consumer economy. We don't know how to not have £5 sandwiches, and then the corporations that exist behind it, and there's the supply chains and so on, all of which create employment and economic activity. But it's kind of descanting on, okay, there are some guys who make the bread.
Yeah.
There's some serious activity going on in the sandwich making, like people are getting fed. However, there's so many layers of consumerism on top of that basis that once it gets swept away by a crisis like this, where all the businesses shut down and nobody has the disposable income to keep going. This universal basic income is kind of like pumping the respirator, to coin a phrase, and they say, okay, well, if you give people some cash, hopefully they'll just pump up this consumer economy still, and keep spending £5 on sandwiches.
Helicopter money, helicopter sandwiches.
Yeah, when actually what we really need to be looking at is where does value really lie? What do people really want out of one another? What do they want out of society? What do they give to society? Because a lot of people are in muck jobs, which don't suit them, which don't give them time to think or to educate themselves or to participate in a knowledge economy. But nevertheless,
who's the comedian in Bill and Ted? The old Rufus. Who plays Rufus in Bill and Ted?
I don't know. Can't remember. He
talks about muck jobs and
yes.
Oh, what's his name? Yeah, because I always thought until basically this afternoon, I always thought it was all of that sort of. I thought that's what stoned people talked about. But now that something's actually happened, it's like, oh. But then what would a expert financier talk about? What would they say?
Well, they'd say we need to, recapitalize collateralized loan obligations.
And that happens by pressing a couple of zeros on the computer at the central bank.
Well, yeah. So that's kind of like the jumper cables when things go wrong. Like they just put in the jumper cables and restart the engine with an injection of fictional money. But as Dan was saying, the whole thing is a pantomime play, which we have to trust in. We have to suspend our disbelief and believe that the sandwich is worth £5 or that the pound is worth something.
Sandwich is not worth £5. It's just that there are some jackasses which are willing to spend that money on the sandwich because they're fucked. Where can you get a decent lunch in London? You can't. You just walk out. You got 15 minutes. You go to the Pret, get a coffee, sandwich, because you got to do it quickly because you don't have all the time to walk to East London to get something.
Yeah. 3 martini lunches. No. So where were we? Yeah. So the trust in the money. Like, there needs then now to be a real conversation beyond the Bitcoiners, beyond the sort of blockchain crypto guys, to really then open up this topic. with people at large. Where does value lie, and how are we going to share it?
If they've shut down all the airlines, and it's getting clean or whatever. So there seems to be some sort of green thing. You touched on that earlier. But so does anybody really need to go to the Costa del Sol on holiday? Does anybody need to go to Mauritius? Does anybody need to go on holiday to sunny places? Or can people just have a nice time in where they are? So holidays are marketing. Holidays, I mean, yes, it is nice to lie by the pool in a sunny place. That is objectively true. But Dan, make the camera on me. There we go, that's much better. So human beings need time to rest and recuperate. Do they need to go to other places to do that? And do those flights need to be subsidized by the government? If there are no flights, if flights become very expensive again, then that industry doesn't exist. Does it need to exist? Does the holiday industry need to exist?
So Thomas Cook collapsed recently, and that was quite intriguing. Looking at the financing of that, a very good friend of the show was actually managing the legals for that. So I kind of got an inside view of some of the concerns which went on. Also, my aunt used to be the CEO, Harriet Green. Shout out to Harriet. That was very intriguing because you could see this collapse of this very viable company that's existed for hundreds of years. It's Victorian. It was a temperance movement. So there was all the non-alcoholic guys going for holidays in the 1850s in the north of England,
right.
And then it suddenly became this global empire. But no, so we were looking at holidays and so on during the collapse of the Thomas Cook scenario, which was almost bailed out by the Chinese, actually, although the package fell through because the bridging loan from the government at the time wasn't there to allow the Chinese to get comfortable with the idea of taking it over. So the whole thing was broken up and sold off, which is sad. However, there's a question of democracy here. If you look at the scandals with Harry and Meghan recently, flying in private jets to go around the world to preach about green, to CEOs who've also taken their private jets to Sicily for a massive conference on greenism.
The wokeocracy.
Yes, the wokeocracy.
Hypocrisy.
Woke. Yes. I like the wokeocracy, actually. That's quite nice.
And it's like there's now something that is actually happening. They can't go around posting their facile images and inspirational quotes who were the Hollywood people who did that awful song this week?
Oh God, which is so tuneless. In times past, decades past, an entertainer would have been a musician like you, Ollie. Would have been a musician. They would have had rhythm. They would have had perfect pitch. They'd be trained in instruments, and they'd be able to sing and dance. And so you see that he's cobbled together a little crappy video. And what is there? It's tuneless. They didn't even have the consciousness to get a backing track, and they sing a phrase each against the backing track. Then at least they've been in tune. But everyone chose their own key. And so you'd have jump cut to somebody singing out of tune in a slightly different key than the previous person,
and laying it on with absolutely laying on the shuji, and it's
you can't do that. You can't do that.
You can't.
It's not for you.
Everyone in that video has no credibility in any form. It proves exactly that all
without
of that
the
stuff,
script, without the production, the makeup. They're zero. They're not actors. They're just placemen.
It was delight. It was
cringeworthy and delightful and horrid all at the same time. So there were some Hollywood celebrities. I'll call them celebrities rather than actors because they're not performers in any way. If you look at what they produce,
attractive women, and some young lads who had probably got a job for the wrong reasons.
Yes, So no, I mean, astonishing lack of production values from like something you. Okay, so how, as a producer, you know, you would take a backing track and you just send it to your friend.
You say, you sing this,
you sing
bar,
this
you
phrase.
sing that bit. Yeah.
You know, practice it 100 times.
Yeah.
Then send me like a clip, and then I'll tell you how you did it wrong, and then we'll do a performance version, and it's like 5 seconds per person.
Yeah.
And you take a day, just like do it right, and they got the back, so they know the pitch that they're starting at when they're singing that.
Yeah, there's some objective measures that you could simply easily jump through, but it wasn't about that. It was about their total blindness to their own kind of. If you're an influencer, there's no point in being an influencer in a time of crisis, because all you're influencing is where people are going to spend their money. Are they going to spend their money on this makeup or that makeup? Are they going to spend their money on this fizzy drink or that fizzy drink? It's like, well, people don't give a fuck about makeup and fizzy drinks these days. It's about toilet paper and pasta. Do you know what
Yes, yes, and hand sanitizer.
It's like, yeah, oh god.
No, the hand sanitizer, the loo roll standard. You know, that's not the gold standard, not the green. A good friend of ours.
It's paper money. Paper money.
Actually, it's in the green. It's literally paper money. The green standard, the idea of having hemp and cannabis as like a gold standard. It's a Bitcoin standard, petrodollar standard. Now we've got the TP standard.
TP standard. Yeah.
But no, so I mean, you could see, you know, preaching from mansions. Like this is where the new populism is kind of taking down all of these false idols. And so we're seeing that, you know, okay, they're in their moated granges in the countryside somewhere, singing at people on Twitter. You know, how do they get away with that? How do they get away with having that as a job when anybody who's taken like grade 3 music in school could do a better job? You know, and anybody who cared about making something beautiful would do it. Like even if you couldn't sing, you do. You know, you make sure you did a better job on a global stage.
If you're an actor, your job's to interpret stuff. It's like, sure, if they're a proper actor, they can't sing. It's like, well, interpret it.
Like Rex Harrison speak singing in My Fair Lady.
Right, exactly, exactly. Just give it your own thing. Don't. Oh, I can't. But what I think that means, what I think that the reason why everybody reacted so badly to that video, because it's no different to any kind of video that's gone before in the influencer world. It's just the times have changed on a sixpence, and now that is as absurd. The context has changed, so that is now absurd. It's not that it never was absurd. It's just it wasn't so obviously absurd because now there's a situation where things have gone a bit hairy. In a simple world of the world of last month, that would have, you know, gone. That would have been acceptable, and well, not acceptable. It still would have been ridiculous.
To a lowest common denominator.
Yeah, but things have changed. And
outlook.
If one good thing comes out of this, it's that all of that knobbery that Imagine song represents, the celebrities singing that, all of that should hopefully be now gone, at least gone for 10 years until the next crash.
Yes. So, you know, what you can see talented people, you can see them on social media. You know, what you can see with these placemen is that they've been given the job. They are the famous person. Yeah. They're not for any reason. It's not like Frank Sinatra. It's not like all these guys that could tap dance. You know, it's not like Count Basie. It's not like, you know, Benny Goodman. You know, anybody who in the past rose from nothing, to Cary Grant, who was a street urchin in a circus in Bristol, who went to America and became a global movie star. You know, all these great performers. You know, we see coming from nothing to, you know, great stardom across the world.
Somehow getting through the gatekeeper. It's like who were the gatekeepers for these fucking idiots, and why were those gates
chosen?
Yeah. So what's the structure that enables those gatekeepers to let those to be the choice decision makers for those celebrities? Do those gatekeepers still exist? I mean, they probably do. Probably nothing's changed. But yeah, the gatekeepers for the celebrities. The gatekeepers are part of consumerism, probably. As in, you can't have. There's no place for those idiots in a world that's got more important things to think about than what to spend its money on.
Yes.
What to spend its disposable income on.
Yes. So you're right. The underpinning of this whole rotten pop culture structure is the advertising dollars. This is why
Yeah, of course.
This is why people are getting deplatformed from social media sites, because the advertisers are uncomfortable with the content being free. So if you look at YouTube, if you look at Twitter, if you look at places that people are being banned from for free speech, over matters of free speech versus censorship, you can see that the driver behind this is, who do the advertisers want on the platform? What kind of speech do advertisers want on platforms? So similarly, you're creating, you can see it in I watched TV ads for the first time in a long time recently, and they're joined up. There's a whole matrix there. So you'll see an ad for like a pizza place, but no, it's not just a pizza place. It's now like Deliveroo, Just Eat, Uber Eats. Like the food comes to you, and you're watching a big screen 1984 TV, and so there's during the ad break, like the food will come to you. Don't go to the food. It's annoying. Like, have the food be delivered to your door. And okay, that makes sense. It's convenient. People like using it. We can do it now. That's great. But what's the consciousness behind it? Because then you have an ad for, have you ever had that time when like you can't find the remote control to your TV and it's really fucking annoying? Now, why don't you just, instead of like looking down the side of the fucking sofa for the remote control, just get Amazon Alexa, and then you can just say, hey Alexa, put on like channel fucking 4, whatever. So
Jeremy Clarkson doing that.
But now you've got these various streams coming in, and then you've got what's in front of you, Netflix, the streaming, right? Literally a stream. So you've got the food, you've got the tech control, and you've got the content passively coming to you. You sit there, and then you can stream anything for hours, forever. And this isn't YouTube content. This isn't people making things and like of what they're obsessed by, what they love, what they're intrigued by. This is pulp content, and it suggests more and more of what you want. Idiocracy. So you've got your food, you've got your tech control, you've got your streamed content, and you're here in the sofa. And then how much of an effort is it to get up and suddenly you put the VR set on and it all goes inside your face, inside your head, you plug in, it's no longer, and then suddenly you're down. And then why not have a pod around you? Because the pod will be warm. It'll be warm, and it'll be like you can concentrate more on the VR. You could have some like thing attached to you, you can have a catheter. You can have a catheter that will just let you just live with no muscular control at all. Just like you can just
in the womb.
Yeah, be back in the womb, and then the Uber Eats can be a food room crew.
You don't have to chew because it goes directly to stomach.
And then you're in the pod, and you've got your VR, and then you're back in the womb again. Yeah. And there we are, and you wake up, like, and you see that is what this TV track. This is the wedge you're seeing. There is a wedge, and that's it. It's pulp everything. It's pulp life. It's farmed. We're being farmed. This is you can, if you only think in a Black Mirror consciousness, like many people have seen Black Mirror, just think of what you're doing now. Think of the Black Mirror episode version of what you're doing now, and that's what it's going to be. That's what that's what the aim is in view, and we're just on the early steps. Dan, switch the camera.
I was going to say, now that was a wonderful piece of storytelling, and that was brilliant, and I agree. Now I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. We're doing a online TV show, streamed straight to your mobile phone or whatever it is you do. That's what we're doing right now, and it's no small feat. I tell you, it's like a lot of fucking
Yeah, Oliver
wires and
can
plugging in and interfaces and fucking
tell you.
does that one match that one exactly? Is it the same frame? Lots of technical stuff has gone into it, but it's in 3 years' time. This will all everyone will be able to do this with anything. So, but what I'm saying is, we're producing this. We're actually producing content for that.
For you.
For you, yeah. We're part of the problem. We're the problem. We're forcing you into some kind of mechanical womb from which the only escape is
suicide.
Total. Well, no, the only escape is a jolt from like a death virus that we're going. It's like the only escape from the womb that what this is making you do is massive disruption to the system that is enabling it. And so it's down to you. It's down to you, to the watcher, to turn this off. I dare you to turn it off and live your own life.
Yes. Off you go. Off you go. You're done. Off you go. You're done. Go out into the world and make something of yourself, man. No! We need you here. Shit! Emancipation! Damn it!
That's life. That's life. That's all of life.
Fly, little birdie, fly.
Yeah. But that is life. Life is about the balance between, the teat and the and being sucked upon. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. The balance. We all live generations. We're a child
between the teat and
we live between the teat and someone sucking our teat. Yeah, we suck someone's teat, someone sucks our teat. It's like it's just like, can you get enough to survive this one?
Yes,
and like that's all. That's all the mechanics of life are about. But maybe we are still wealthy enough to have these thoughts. I think wealth is about being able to have spare bandwidth in your own thoughts to have to think about anything.
We have a call coming in from Christabel Milbank, friend of the show.
Righty tighty.
Jen, change this. Hey, Christabel, you're online.
No, I'm not. I'm still watching this hard rock idiot talking about sucking on teeth.
I'm not a fucking idiot.
Christabel, Oliver Christabel. So, we're on a slight delay. Oh, okay, I see. How much is the delay? It's a couple of seconds.
Oh, I'm really confused. It's like a time loop.
So Christabel has had coronavirus. Just mute that, and then you're on, and then you will catch up to the present. You were in a time loop for a second. Okay, so everyone, this is Christabel Milbank. She is
don't say my full name.
PR guru, astonishing PR guru, poetess, thinker, prognosticatrix, and she has been quarantining herself. How is it going?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I obviously have nothing better to do than watch you guys. It's been really fascinating watching you all talk. What have I been up to? I've been trying to rehabilitate myself. Trying to smell anything. I've lost my sense of smell.
So you were on a ski trip, and then suddenly Corona struck.
Yeah, I was on a
Zermatt,
ski trip, and I had.
Was it Verbier?
I went to a very nice dinner with a lot of jet set millionaire people who naturally gave me the virus, the bastards. And 3 other people at the dinner have got the virus, have been confirmed positive. They haven't given me a test, but I did go to hospital. And
well, if you didn't have it before you went to hospital, then you probably had it when you're going back.
Yeah, well, I went to hospital and they put me on a drip and the whole thing. And I said, well, can I get tested now? And then the doctor says, I'm sorry, Boris isn't allowing us to test anybody, but it's my professional opinion that you probably have coronavirus. And then she said, but you can go back home on public transport. So, I don't know.
So what have the symptoms been?
Well, that was a week ago. I had a temperature of 49 degrees. Sure. I was quite delirious. I couldn't watch Friends without, struggling to breathe, which is not normal. So I called not 911. 111. And
I called them emergency services in America, and they didn't respond.
They told me, you're delirious, you're in the wrong country. Yeah, no, apparently I was delirious, so that was a problem. And yeah, I have coronavirus, but in the past couple of days I've noticed I've completely lost my sense of smell, like it's turned off completely.
Oh, I've got that.
If I stick my nose in a tub of Vicks Vapor Rub, I can't smell anything.
Is that because you've
so
clogged
it's
up
really
your nose
worrying.
with the Vicks Vapor Rub?
Well, I think the corona's hit my brain, which is possibly why I'm still finding you lot entertaining. I don't know.
No, so what they sent you home, have they had any further contact with you, or do they not really care?
I got one of those text messages saying, rate us from 1 to 10. How was your experience? Where we did, were we satisfactory? Have had no contact from them. Yeah, it's worrying. It's worrying that
Oliver,
I may be a super spreader. Who knows?
Yeah. So you're locked down for a while. Is the symptoms abating, or are you on the mend? Can people who have it be? Can people who have it be safe in the knowledge that they're going to get through it?
Well, it depends. I mean, I know a lot of people who have got it who are absolutely fine. Women in their 50s and so forth. I'm not in my 50s. I'm a very young hot chick. And I mean, like temperature-wise, I'm really
fever. You've got a fever.
I'm a young person, but I think maybe I've got some kind of autoimmune issues or something, because it seems to have hit me really hard. Like, I didn't anticipate losing one of my senses. I didn't anticipate not being able to breathe properly and feeling like, if the ambulance didn't come, that I might pass out. But yeah, so I think for that reason it is something that people should worry about, because you never know what kind of underlying symptoms, underlying problems you may have. I'm otherwise healthy, but this has kind of struck me down.
And very eligible.
How are you, Lorenzo? You look like you might have coronavirus, judging by your slumped position on the couch.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's certainly, we live in interesting times, and we're seeing like martial law across Europe, and sort of a slow march towards lockdown, which is really not something you could ever have expected a week ago.
Well, I knew all this was going to happen. I mean, it's so obvious. We have too many people on the planet, and listen, if this wasn't engineered, what a great thing. I mean, no wonder Boris is just like, yeah, some people are going to die. Like, what a great thing. We're going to get rid of, a significant number, get rid of a slice of the population, which is what they want, isn't it? But obviously it's not a great thing, I'm being ironic, but it seems very convenient. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear more. About your thoughts behind this, if it was engineered, and if it wasn't engineered, the engineered response to that.
Well, we know that COVID-19 emerged from the level 4 super lab in Wuhan, and the evidence for that, quite interestingly, came from the website of the Wuhan lab, which only a couple of months ago was offering for postdocs to come and do research in Wuhan on bat viruses, on coronaviruses that infect bats, and to look at how they might jump to humans. And the more I've studied epidemiology in this very short period when it's become like the hot topic, the more it's become interesting to me that that curing a disease and weaponizing a disease are actually two sides of the same coin and happen in the same facilities. And also, so the same project by which you harness a disease to cure it and find the antidote is the process by which you can also weaponize that pathogen. And so this two sides of the same coin notion was really shocking to me, to the extent that there was a good Joe Rogan the other day, which I recommend everyone see, with an epidemiologist whose name escapes me for the moment. I'll find it in a second. And he mentioned another very serious disease that's being studied in super labs across the world, which is CWD, chronic wasting disease. It's a deer disease, which is having a lot of exposure to the human population by hunters like Joe Rogan, actually, hunting those deer and eating the flesh, it's a prion disease like BSE and CJD. And so it's a very long life cycle, long gestation period in the body, but then it leads to kind of foaming at the mouth and wasting of muscles, and the deer just really have a horrible death. Now that's spreading throughout America, various deer populations there. His name's Michael Osterholm, and it was a week ago, the Joe Rogan Experience 1439. He's an epidemiologist, and he really gives a deep dive, an hour and a half deep dive on the sort of the problems around corona. But he was saying that the scientists are very concerned that this deer disease the flesh being eaten by humans, they're concerned that this prion disease is going to have chronic wasting disease is going to have a lot of opportunity to infect humans as it has more exposure to the human biome. And he mentioned the key though that he mentioned with his analogy to corona was this: that in the lab, when they're studying it, they're very concerned that what they call humanized mice are getting this disease and dying, and the humanized mice getting it means the humans are likely to get it. They've turned, essentially what they've done is they've turned
mice into humans.
No,
Humanized mice.
they've edited the genome. They've edited the genome of the mice so that the interior of their body feels to pathogens more like the interior of the human body. Think about the mouse from the 80s with the human ear growing on its back.
Anyway, I'm gonna sign off because I want to hear you saying all this stuff on YouTube, because if I hold the phone too long to my head, I might get some brain disease. Bye.
Okay, ciao. No, so on Christabel's point, we've got a new question in the live chat. That's quite nice.
What's the question?
Let's have a look. The humanized mice, so this is exactly where you can see that there's two sides of the same coin: study, cure on the one hand, and weaponization on the other. Because as you study it, then you can also work out how to make it more infectious. Andrew asks, Andrew Swampalai, friend of the show, very great eye doctor. His name escapes me. No, eye doctor, ophthalmologist, as ophthalmologist. Andrew Swampalai, great ophthalmologist, friend of the show. Question for the panelists: opinion on Greta and Extinction Rebellion, please. Dan? Greta Thunberg. What do you think?
Not much. I wasn't particularly impressed with her. I thought it was cute. I mean, they got a girl in the UN. It's meant to be, impactful. Like, how come a little girl cares more about these issues than these world leaders? But I mean, it was cute. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are not going to talk about saving the planet. They're going to talk about how they're going to partition Syria. Yes. So I mean, it was sweet. Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, it's important. I mean, I'm being a bit funny about it, but it's important that we're becoming more aware of it. We in London are, people talk about it. There's a lot of people with masters, PhDs, it's really people with an education are really predisposed to have these high-minded concerns about the world, but like for just making the vast majority of the population aware about these changes, that's a good thing. If it makes it the news, yeah, it's more of a marketing stunt.
Yeah, and I was quite interested that Steve Bannon and had found like a right-wing girl, the same age, and then put her in front of CPAC, which I thought was quite interesting. This it's a weaponized Joan of Arc. So on that topic, historian Dan, Joan of Arc, Greta, parallel? Is she the latter day Jeanne d'Arc?
Yeah, I don't think she's going to become a symbol of Norway, but who the hell knows? Actually, maybe. I mean, why did Greta die or something? Did they burn her?
Not yet.
I mean, like, yeah, well, if they sacrifice her, if she wants to, like, in the spirit of Jesus Christ, just be burned to save the planet.
There were some papers actually from.
Maybe she's the sacrifice we need. Just a little virgin needs to die for the world to be saved, and then the coronavirus will go away.
In the like Iphigenia at Aulis, where Agamemnon kills his daughter to get the wind behind his back, behind his sails, to go to Troy and kill a whole more people. And that's of course why Clytemnestra then kills him his wife kills him when he comes home, because he killed their daughter to get off the beach. Anyway, that's beside the point. But on the topic of dangerous demises and Extinction Rebellion, I did see an article the other day which mentioned that there was a point mooted in the Extinction Rebellion fraternity that they should commit suicide in public to advertise for the problem of climate change. But then there was a sort of that wasn't taken up. They didn't have any volunteers for that policy, and certainly whoever tabled the motion didn't volunteer themselves. But no, millenarianism. Are all of these crises feeding into and feeding off this sort of fin de siècle idea that we have, that there's going to be some great catastrophe coming, the apocalypse is nigh, some St. John Revelation, 4 horsemen are going to come over the horizon.
I mean, that's a bit rich coming from the 20th century, right? Some apocalypse. I mean, come on, get real. The world wars, the influenza, all the crap that happened.
But do we have affluenza now? Is affluenza the problem? We haven't had any problems, so we're going to think of some more.
Even Alexander Pope, back in the 18th century, complained about affluenza. I mean, consumerism has existed since the dawn of civilization. People had pretty things, right? Look at the random stuff Persian kings would wear and how they decorated their beards. I mean, now perhaps we've reached a new stage of how decadent it is.
It's about your Instagram followers rather than the jewels in your beard.
I mean, yeah, it's still something to do with status. That's the kind of the point. It's trying to stand out from the crowd by doing exactly what everyone else does.
Rebels in jeans.
Yeah.
Rebels in jeans. When 1 billion people wear jeans, you're being a rebel by wearing jeans as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the, we've come to a point perhaps where we have a very highly individualistic society, and I feel that it's becoming apparent actually with social media that people aren't as individualistic or unique as they think. I mean, I didn't want to get Instagram or get a camera because I felt like all the ideas I would have had, they're kind of quite proliferated by others. But I think the good thing is that people understand their own banality better. So there's actually, they kind of know what other people think. So there's like a better idea of them trying to push outside the boundaries. But yeah, this is maybe what this virus should teach us, is that we need to move away from individualism to a more communitarian or collective spirit. I don't know.
It's a
Maybe.
bat pangolin virus.
What?
It's a bat
Yeah.
/ pangolin.
Yeah, this is the cover story that I mean, a friend of the show, Ish, who was with us last week. He's currently in quarantine here in London. He was in America. Sent me a video which I'll find for the next show. I'm sure it'll still be relevant by then. Of the meat market, the kind of exotic animal meat market in Wuhan, which isn't far from the super lab. Now, you know, in the Salisbury, you know, it's Portendown is in Salisbury. You'll see that these there's always a pretext for these chemical biological outbreaks, and it's, you know, and it's not, the cause wasn't pangolin meat and it wasn't bat meat. The cause was the disease being studied in the lab. Now, whether that escaped or whether that was released, that's not a relevant, you know, speculation to the quite clear notion. And we can bring up, if you bring up zero hedge, if you just search for zero hedge umbrella.
Okay.
Oh no! After this, what's this? What's this?
That's a pangolin with its tits out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, they're kind of cute. I mean, they're sort of reptilian, aren't they? It's like a sort of trilobite becomes a reptile, becomes a mammal. Yeah. Is that going to be censored on YouTube? You know, I mean, is that free? Is are pangolin tits free speech? That's the question. Are pangolin tits free speech? Well, we'll have to ask, you know, Mark Zuckerberg. What was the image you wanted? Oh no, it was if you search Zero Hedge Umbrella Corp, I think it should come up. This is the actual evidence that all this happened, and we're not just talking out of our asses.
Russian media?
No, it's a Western. It's kind of economics focused news outlet. Christabel says it looks like Lorenzo's girlfriend. Of the pangolin, I think, rather than of Dan's pretty face. But see, if you look for zero hedge Umbrella Corp.
Umbrella Corp. Yeah, the real Umbrella Corp. Wuhan Ultra Biohazard Lab was studying the world's most dangerous pathogens.
Yes, if you go down, so that's firstly, well, it's the top. There's a map. At the top, there's a map. And then it shows Wuhan's lab, and then if you go down, yeah, there's the lab in Wuhan. And if you go down further, they've got like the job ad that they screen capped off the website. No, maybe it's not in this one. I don't know. It's somewhere on here. Anyway, so they found the job ads on the Wuhan Super Lab site. Which they then screen grabbed and translated from the Chinese, which said, you know, we're looking for specialists in bat viruses to come as postdocs and study here and study this COVID viruses. And so, of course, that's where it's from. You know, the extent to which the food market is a vector is, you know, it's like as we mentioned in our documentary with Nick O'Shaughnessy, Professor Nick O'Shaughnessy, on propaganda, which is also available on the New Athens YouTube channel. And I should announce that, you know, we're going to be doing some broadcasts with him this weekend. Now that university's shut down, Nicholas O'Shaughnessy, Professor Nicholas O'Shaughnessy, is going to be with us here at the New Athens and Morning Comenia doing some examinations of propaganda in the modern age, in current affairs, and predicting where we're going in the future. And that's going to be starting this weekend. So I'll hopefully we'll be able to tune in for that really fascinating talk. But yeah, what Nick said was that the story in the 80s of AIDS being a product of like Jane Goodall style researchers in Africa having sex with chimps that story was introduced by the Soviets into an Indian newspaper, which they used as their kind of vector to introduce propaganda into the Western kind of bloodstream. Interesting metaphor. But in the same way, often you get these cover stories as with the Wuhan sort of bats and eating pangolins. That's interesting.
AIDS advert.
Oh, okay.
Advert for AIDS.
But like is this like
this was the health propaganda from
we had the sound?
Infected person. Anyone can get it, man or woman. So far, it's been confined to small groups, but it's spreading. So protect yourself. And read this leaflet when it arrives. If you ignore AIDS, it could be the death of you. So don't die of ignorance.
I've been searching for.
This is yeah, and then there's good AIDS and bad AIDS from
Brass Eye.
Yes, Brass Eye.
Everyone's got AIDS. AIDS.
That's from the Book of Mormon, right?
The puppet film, the South Park puppet film.
Oh yeah.
America.
Team America World Police. Yeah, with the croissant-shaped golden cobblestones.
Well, he's like dancing in a Broadway musical.
I'm Ronry. Yeah, no, he's
Team America World Police. America, fuck yeah.
We've got the from Christabel. We have in the one response point from weird. It says it's connecting, but it's actually calling. We've got the one point of contact. Christabel's calling back in. If you mute the other thing, then we won't go in the time loop this time. Christabel Milbank, everybody.
Hi, I just wanted to say, I just played it back. I wanted to say thank you, Lorenzo, for the lovely introduction, and sorry, Oliver, for saying you're an idiot. You're really hot, and also I sound really nice on the telephone. That's what I wanted to say. Have a good one. Bye.
Okay, ciao.
Ciao.
Yeah,
Christabel Milbank, friend of the show.
I hate listening to
so she's and
myself.
Ollie's really hot. She likes rockers.
I don't know, Christabel.
She likes rockers, and she's looking for one. So she sent us through the response, the NHS response by text, the only further point of contact that Christabel's had, having been suspected to have had coronavirus. Her point of contact from the NHS was a text message. It reads thus: "Hello. The staff at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital who looked after you recently would benefit from your feedback. How likely are you to recommend our emergency department to friends and family if they needed similar care or treatment? Reply with 1, extremely likely, 2, likely, 3, neither likely nor unlikely, 4, unlikely, 5, extremely unlikely, or 6, don't know. Your feedback is important to us. Replies are free and anonymous. If you do not want to receive further texts, please reply STOP in all caps. If you've already completed a paper survey, please ignore this message. Thank you." So
I don't trust the NHS. I think that they're not as competent as they should be. It's not that they're not competent, actually. I take that back. I think that they're over-regulated. And the doctors are just stifled with, yeah. I mean, what, like this thing about your friend, like she's not allowed to be tested. Like, what the fuck? That's strange. I'm really interested in how they justify that.
I think it's just lack of kit. Is the current word on the street.
Yeah, but not to. Why can't the doctor basically just admit that?
Or rather than saying we're not testing
because of Boris, yeah.
I'm not sure, but what I'm really interested in is okay, we've got the kind of tick box aftercare text message, but surely Christabel is a vector for a potential vector for infection because she's gone home on public transport untreated. Apart from like get some bed rest, it's fine. It's we think you have it, but it's a cold or whatever. So and that's
Fever,
if that's the next like step, it's not really joined up. There needs to be sort of a tech layer in there of making sure the aftercare exists and the monitoring and so on.
Israel's apparently going forward with that. So they made an app whereby everyone who has coronavirus has to basically register, and they know your location where you are. So they open up the app and they know everybody who has coronavirus. This is what Alex Jones and InfoWars are so concerned about, that the digitized vaccines will be essentially putting a chip in your skin with the vaccine, so you can be monitored and tracked, and that will be the price of the vaccine. Bill Gates has the patents for those. Christabel's calling us back. I'm not putting any fucking chips in my body.
Christabel Milbank.
Seeing as you're still talking about this, I thought I'd add, actually, I didn't really tell you part of the story.
Great.
When I got into the ambulance came to my house and I got in. They took all my vitals and everything, and they said I had a high temperature and a high heartbeat. And then they gave me a choice. They said, well, you kind of seem better now, because by the time the ambulance arrived, it was like 5 hours later. I'd actually managed to fall asleep and then wake up. And by that time, the wave of extreme illness had kind of passed. So they were like, well, you kind of seem better now. And I'm like, yeah, I feel good. They said, would you like to go to the hospital and get tested? Which will take 4 hours, and you won't leave the ambulance. Someone will come in and swab you, and then we'll drive you home. Or would you just like to stay at home and, see how it goes? And they said, regardless what happens, if you test positive or negative, it doesn't matter. We don't know, we won't know for a couple of days, and we're still going to drive you home anyway. So, and I said, well, I'd like to get tested. I'd like to, find out one way or another, what's going on. So then we went. And when we arrived to the hospital, we waited for a bit in the ambulance, as I was told was going to happen. And then somebody came to the ambulance and said, actually, she's got to come in. So I didn't realize I was ever leaving this ambulance. So I was in my pajamas and like a pair of hotel room slippers and a fluffy hat.
Which we now have.
They frog marched me outside into the pouring rain, and I had to walk all the way to the back of the hospital. And it was really cold. And then went into this bit at the back of the hospital, which I've never seen before. And then they put me on a bed in a really, really, really freezing cold ward that was kind of sparse and didn't have that much equipment and everything. So suddenly I'd gone from being very happy in the ambulance to shivering like crazy on this hospital bed, and the doctors had very little protection. They wore very flimsy little masks, and I said, aren't you worried? And they were one of them says, well, I hope you're not going to cough on me. It was really weird. And that's when they told me that they wouldn't be able to test me. And they said, oh, well, that's what we were doing before. We were bringing people in the ambulances to the hospital and testing them in the ambulance van.
Okay, so you weren't put in a.
What we're doing anymore.
So you weren't put in a triage. So you weren't put in a kind of tank with other people who may or may not have corona.
There were some other people there, but there was. I felt pretty alone. But there was one other person on a bed. But I felt kind of tricked, because had I been told that I wasn't going to be tested, I wouldn't have bothered going to the blooming hospital.
Or getting out of the ambulance.
Or get it, and if I'd known that I was going to go to the hospital, I would have put on proper clothes and everything. But yeah, so then they left me on this bed for ages and put me on a drip, and and they did an X-ray of my chest, they did blood test and everything. And I was deemed okay to go home on public transport, which of course I protested so strongly against, because I hate public transport. But it was really odd that the people in the ambulance, they were not given this up-to-date information. They were still performing the duties as they had been doing it before. And obviously Boris is making these day-by-day changes, but still, shouldn't they have been told? How did I get to the hospital? Without a test, it just doesn't make any sense. I was so annoyed by this, and also I got really ill in the hospital. I was freezing cold. Obviously, I had a high fever and everything, but it wasn't pleasant, and it was very stressful. And I kind of felt like I was going to be left there forever. A friend of mine, a friend of yours actually as well, Lorenzo, since you stole him off me, Russ Rossi, he told me that he's got some officers in South Korea, and apparently they found out that one person had coronavirus, and they followed him on his way home and shot him before he could even get to his house.
What is this? South Korea? I'm gonna go now. South or North Korea?
Love you.
Bye. I think she may have meant North Korea. South Korea is a wonderful place, and produced this phone. This is Samsung Note 10 Plus, which we love so much. It's the greatest phone on the planet. We highly recommend South Korean tech is excellent.
You've come full circle.
Yes, back to our first point that we made on that safer over there.
I watched Vanilla Sky today.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I finished watching it. I never finished watching it before.
Which one is Vanilla Sky?
With Tom Cruise. Where
it's Abre los Ojos. So so there was a Spanish film called Abre los Ojos, was it? And then they remade it a year later as Vanilla Sky. The Spanish version had Penelope Cruz in as well, and she played the same character in both the Spanish and the English films. But it was Javier Bardem was Tom Cruise in the Spanish version. Funny enough, they made them a year apart, the Spanish and the English version. There's Cameron Diaz and yes, I remember they have the car crash over the bridge.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a cool idea actually, and I was thinking a bit. I think I'd want to die. I honestly with these virtual reality options to sort of cryogenically freeze your body and then plug your consciousness into some kind of machine or computer.
Oh, did you see?
I think I'd rather die.
Did you see the one where they uploaded Johnny Depp into the cloud? It was I can't remember what the name was. It was something.
So I can download Johnny Depp, basically.
Yeah. So what Johnny Depp was like Steve Jobs. By the way, Steve Jobs is Siri.
Right.
Everyone know that Steve Jobs. They did do this with Steve Jobs. He is watching you as Siri and listening in the afterlife, in the sort of tech afterlife. But it was.
That's interesting.
It was. I wasn't. I keep thinking contagion because I keep hearing this word, but it was a C word, and it was a Johnny Depp movie where he was like a Steve Jobs tech baron and died, and then they uploaded him to the cloud, and then he became like a super being and started manipulating all the computers and so on.
What film is this?
If you look at it, it begins with a C. It's got Johnny Depp. It's about tech.
It's the new one,
and it's a couple of years old.
The new Johnny Depp one, yeah.
The name,
because there was that film with Brad Pitt. And the advertising was just literally Brad Pitt's face, so it looked like it was Brad Pitt the movie. When you have these big names, it's Brad. It
was called Transcendence. Transcendence.
Yeah.
It was released in 2014, so a couple of years ago, 6 years ago now. So Transcendence.
BC. Before Corona.
Yes.
6 years BC.
No, it's year zero. Or is it patient zero?
When are we going to have a new calendar?
We should have.
I'm offended that it's
I'm a
Jesus
real
Christ.
Advocate of the lunar calendar. I mean, you've got 13 months of 28 days each, which gives you 364 days, and there's one leap day every year, which is New Year's Day, is not in a month. You have 13 months of 20, even months of 28 days, which correspond with the lunar cycle, which correspond with women's cycles, and it's a feminist calendar. And so you can then plot the phases of the moon against the days in the month. So rather than saying, well, I don't know what the fuck the moon's doing, is it full moon? You could say like the 15th is the full moon, of every month in the year. And then you have your one leap day as New Year's Day, which isn't in any month. And you've got 365 days. You're done. You've got your calendar. And that's how the Mayan calendar worked. It's called the lunar calendar. It exists. It's much more logical than the Gregorian and Julian stuff that we're subjected to, which is befuddling. Like, we don't have a handle on the stars and their alignments and the ways in which they interact with the planet and with us. Whether it's in menstrual cycles, whether it's in the tide, whether it's in the phases of the moon, whether it's in the seasons, we're totally disconnected. And this would be a good thing for Greta. Like, this would be a lunar Greta, if you're listening, 13-month lunar calendar, 28 days each. It's a feminist calendar. It's an environmentalist calendar. It'll get us back to our roots. That's your campaign.
Do you think
not trying to prevent nuclear power and hydroelectric dams, which you can tell. To get back to Andrew's question from earlier, the problem with the Extinction Rebellion is this: if you look at smart cities, if you look at tech infrastructure, if you look at developed society, developed civilization, the means by which we can generate enough energy to keep on the tech platform and level that we have and build upon that without using fossil fuels is nuclear, and it's hydro. It's hydroelectric, tidal power as well, possibly, if we can get it on stream. Wind power and solar power are unreliable. They're not even, they don't provide even current.
I don't know the facts, but I think hydroelectric, because it takes up so much concrete, is quite energy intensive to produce, and isn't that effective at generating. I think the amount of concrete it takes makes hydroelectric not as useful as it might seem.
You might very well think that, and I could possibly comment. Now, I was speaking with some good friends from Georgia, the country, not the state, in Verbier back in 2018. We sat down, we were talking about mining crypto in the Caucasus Mountains. So the rivers flowed, there's thousands of rivers flowing down the Caucasus Mountains very steeply, with a great incline, and the water moves very fast. Now, they've created new, in Georgia, they're piloting new hydroelectric dams which don't have a reservoir. They don't build a huge wall and create a reservoir behind that wall. It's called an in-river hydro dam. So, hydro power plant, essentially. It's not a dam at all. So what it is just a turbine in the river, and the flow of the river flows through the turbine and powers the generator to create electricity. You don't have that big wall of water to create the pressure to force the water through that turbine to create the power. Instead, it's using the in-river power that exists anyway. There's no reservoir behind it. And hence, of course, when you're powering a city with this, you're losing a lot of the energy because the river's flowing all the time, and you can't really store it in batteries. The battery tech is much beneath the generation tech. Lithium and so on is not available on the scale to create batteries that that store that electricity. So it's kind of through. There's the river flows through the turbine, the energy goes, and you've got to use it or not. And so our notion with the Georgians was, let's mine crypto when the city's not being powered. So when you divert the power, instead of being wasted because the water's always flowing and you're not regulating that stream, then instead you use it to mine crypto for the city when it's not powering the city. And that's a really cool, a cool use of crypto and a cool use of the spare power. But you're right, Ollie, about the large dams. They're massive infrastructure projects, but these in-river dams are very cheap to produce by comparison. Now, what's the underpinning behind this? Why does Extinction Rebellion not talk about nuclear and hydro? Why instead do they only talk about solar and wind, which is unreliable? It can't subsist, our level of civilization on that irregularity of power. Now, fundamentally, the concept they have is of the Western world degrading its tech infrastructure, like living in tents. Like that's there's a Luddite, a deep Luddite element to the Extinction Rebellion proposition of not just creating energy without hydrocarbons, creating energy without the release of carbon dioxide, but there's a moral crusade there. There's like there's this notion that Western civilization at our level of tech is somehow immoral, and that returning to the land, returning to a previous agrarian or hunter-gatherer even reality will salve the human spirit and create a new man, which is more beautiful and natural, more Rousseauvian, back to the noble savage. There's a noble savage idea in Extinction Rebellion. What do you think?
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you this, but you kind of came to this topic by yourself. Do you think that the Green Movement has its intellectual roots in anarchism? And just to say anarchism as in Kropotkin, Bakunin, not the idea that it's just going to be some chaos and on the street, but I mean, like, the intellectual notion of communitarian culture, of subsistency, small scale kind of
what sort of emergent government from the will of a very small people,
an organically kind of created community, which is kind of like in some form of global confederation. But it's also like I feel that the Green Movement definitely takes a lot of that inspiration.
Of course.
The glocalist, they call it glocalism, but really that's anarchism, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, anarchism has
it has a bad name. They really
it's got a really rich history in political theory.
Yeah.
And it's got a very bad name because of the propaganda slurs against it, and with enemy, with sowing chaos and throwing bombs into streetcars, being called anarchism when actually it was nothing to do with anarchism. And that was a smear by both the communist left and the right. Yeah. They both never liked anarchism. Look at Nestor Makhno, who you had me read about, and the Green Army in
the Green Army,
Ukrainian Revolution.
Uncanny, right? The Green Army,
the Democratic Army that fought both the whites and the reds in the Russian Revolution. And so Nestor Makhno, who was Ukrainian, created a democratic anarchist army which defended essentially what Donetsk and Lubyansk, where now you can see the rebellion against the
that's why they're rebelling.
Maidan, Ukraine,
predisposed.
That's their way. They are that's their way of being. And so anarchism has a really rich intellectual and history, and in terms of practice, but it's been totally demolished in terms of its reputation.
But it came back in the new rebranding as the Green Movement.
Well, yeah, I mean, my father told me,
which is a smarter way. I mean, it's a good comeback, because anarchism, that's it.
My father told me
that means chaos.
My father told me that green is it's communist. In the root idea of the Green Movement is that people cannot own land. That's the foundation stone of that political theory, is that people don't live as long as land does. Therefore, if you really go back to the roots, people cannot own land, and so then the rest of the green ideology emerges from that axiom.
But I think communism, to be honest, we've outlived it. In Western society, it's not applicable anymore.
So Amy, a good friend of the show, says, "Hey, I'm in Wirral. I love your idea of a moral crusade. Unpack that more." So yeah, I think we don't talk in terms of political ideology really that much in today's consumer culture, and
universities.
Instead we look at charities. We look at moral crusades in society, because look at the traditional leftist position is the workers of the world unite. It's about jobs and conditions of labor and pay and social services. These are the grounds on which socialism really makes an offering to people. Is let's collectivize so that we can make sure that we get the social services that we need. Now, the new left says, so there's a critique of capitalism in the old left. It says, we don't think that the means of production should be owned by the few. They should be collectivized and owned by everyone, because then if you have democratic governance of those means of production, you've got the best chance of the most people having some nice life and sharing those resources around. It's a very clear, proposition. Like, we don't like CEOs. Now, the new left says something different. It says not that we don't like CEOs, but we want green female CEOs. Like, we want women who have the right politics to be the CEOs, and then it's fine. So the new left has emerged from a critique of capitalism. They're all capitalists now. It's that the new left is a capitalist movement. There's no critique of capitalism in there. There's no saying, well, we want to re-examine the basis on which this economy is grounded. Instead, we just want to change the staffing at the top level to reflect our own moral wishes, and that's all we need, because then we can do the march of the institutions and gather speed.
Because
that way.
we're living in a different world. I'm saying the communism It was an interesting musical break
from art resident musician. So you were saying
it's inapplicable, communism in the British society, for example.
Yeah, of course. I'm saying just on a.
But I think we need to. I think we need to. The left's role, it should be to promote ethical capitalism, at least.
But that's not my point. Is that's not the traditional role of the traditional role of the left, was to provide a critique of capitalism to move towards collectivization of resources for the many. What we have now is only a critique of the staffing of capitalism. So we don't want CEOs, we want green female CEOs. And that, to me, is why all of the ethical force of the left has evacuated. Now this new left has emerged, because this is why you see the rise of Trump and Dominic Cummings, because they're now looking to the worker and giving more of a proposition of, hey, like, here's some conditions, get some jobs, and we'll build some infrastructure so our industry can be better, and we can all collectivize the profit of that. And that is a more intriguing proposition to people who are actually workers than green female CEOs. Within the capitalist structure that exists.
This is the thing, is that it was always an elitist intellectual movement, like socialism. People historically they've been more susceptible to nationalism, right? As a unifying force, or as something that gets their blood boiling, not socialism. That's a very elitist thing, and they are. I mean, it's like. It's for people with university degrees, and to discuss these ideas, because they're detached. They're really detached from most people, from the kind of decisions that most people want to have done. The green, ethical female CEOs. It's a bit.
Amy follows up, asking, how do you think the idea of a green female CEO is going to change now the economy is taking a turn? Well, I mean, I think we're going to see from this new populist movement that has gathered the workers to its banner and evacuated the power base of the new left, certainly electorally, and also in terms of like positive progress towards a goal the betterment of those people rather than the betterment of, as you say, an intellectual debate about the parameters of capitalism. As that starts having an effect, you're going to see the new left debate even further leaving the political mainstream, because it's irrelevant to it's irrelevant for the goals of ordinary people. And to go back to Oliver's point about flights, do people need holidays on flying and so on? Okay, if you're going to Europe, train infrastructure can be made a lot better and a lot more joined up. Yeah, great. But the point about cheap flights, and especially cheap flights, is that it democratized travel. So you can fly anywhere for under £100 within a continent's width, and you can fly for £20 to St. Petersburg, as people can do now from Luton, just up the road from me, and Philip does regularly when he goes. And so it is massively opened up and democratized travel. So of course you have these rich people who can take their private jets, like all of the green DiCaprio, Al Gore, and Harry and Meghan class, who can take their private jet to a green conference. But the green movement will then say, well, those rich people, because they have money, we're not going to stop. We don't want to take the money away from them. We want to give more to charity. So we're not going to have a critique of the rich, and we're going to, because they're influencers, we want them to go to the climate conference and preach to one another about green in their private jets. That's fine. We just want to take away the democratization of travel. We want to take away the ability of everybody to travel where they want and meet other people and see architecture and landscape and experience different cultures and have cross-border contact. So Oliver, you're right that there is a question about this top-down notion of should travel be permitted by the command economy state, this sort of green surveillance state of what's your carbon footprint as an individual. But this is fundamentally comes from this rotten, corrupt notion of consumer power, the idea that you can vote with your money, which doesn't actually work because the money's fake, as we were discussing before. The money's a fiction. So you don't have consumer power. They want you to think that you've got a second set of votes with your consumer power and with your actual ballot box vote. And that, so, if you buy vegan food from a supermarket that also sells meat, you're giving the supermarket a signal to the yay vegan food, but you're not giving them the inverse signal of boo meat, because you're still paying the money to the supermarket. That's what all they get is yay Sainsbury's. If you go to Sainsbury's and Sainsbury's sells meat and vegan products, and you buy the vegan products from Sainsbury's, you're just the economic signal they get is yay Sainsbury's. It's not like, oh, we wish you would do more of that and less of the other, because they get the benefit either way. So all of your consumer power, and then there's another thing. When you take your money, your green vegetarian pound, and then you spend it on goods and services, the person with whom you're transacting, you've severed your fee simple in that transaction. It's no longer your money, it's their money now. Maybe it represents your capital or your labor, but once you've participated in the transaction and there's no ongoing contract, it's a finalized money transaction. You've severed your fee simple. It's not your money anymore. And let's say you're a vegetarian and you hire a cab or you buy a pair of slippers, and the guy with whom you're transacting eats meat. He can take your money, wave it in your face, and go and buy a bacon sandwich and eat it in front of you and laugh. Because that's how the money system works. It's a universal means of exchange. So all of your consumer power is worth naught, because as soon as you go 1 degree of separation, 10 seconds after the transaction, your transacting party can spend that money on what they will. That's how the system works. So what you see there is that they're trying to bring you down. They're trying to bring your horizons down again, like the pod, like the Matrix pod. They're bringing your horizons down into the consumer power reality of I can spend my money on a moral cause. When if you think about it for a moment, you realize that actually, as soon as you have an ongoing chain and a past chain of this means of this medium of transaction, then you don't know where it goes, and you certainly can't police where it goes or has been. So there are blockchain solutions for this, which we'll discuss anon. I've come up with a proof of concept called VeggieCoin of a vegetarian cryptocurrency, which will solve this problem of the ethical currency. But that's another discussion for another time.
I mean, how are you going to create an ethical currency? I mean, it's easy to have the dollar, to have the state-backed currencies. I mean, I don't know. Can you see in our lifetime that the state will go away? I kind of think if it does, it is going to be through like a very traumatic circumstance. So it won't be a good thing.
I had a thought about the state.
Yeah.
I'll go here so the microphone is here. This is my thought. So at the moment, the states all come up all big because the lockdown or whatever. So let's say it is martial law.
Yeah.
Let's say you go outside and you're not allowed to go outside, and the policeman says, "Oi, come here," and you go, "No," and you punch the policeman in the face. What you've done is you punch a human being in the face, but that human being represents the state, and so you've punched the state in the face, and so the state goes, right, you're in serious trouble now, and so. And I thought about the word state. So the people, if they are or whatever, vote for the state, put the state in power. And so it's the state of mind of people.
Leviathan, yeah.
Yes.
So it's the state is the state of mind of people. And you can't actually hit the state. The state doesn't exist. It only exists in people's minds.
No,
so
yeah.
the policeman represents the state, but the state doesn't actually exist.
It's just a bunch of bureaucras and law enforcers. That's
but
that's the advice. That's how it is.
No, but all I'm saying, it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
I know.
It doesn't. It's not summed up in a
person. The
person.
machinery of the state. It's like they're human beings, but they're not the state. It's like
they're vessels, but
not.
not.
I mean, all
they
public
ride the bureaucracy on. It's like that's still not the state. The state's in the minds of the people.
Yeah.
It's like so. If the law, if they pass a law saying you're not allowed to eat bacon, then that's that's essentially the brain of the people saying that. So it's just a thought. It's like a group thought, and basically what I'm saying is state is similar to state of mind. I don't know if that's an original thought.
No, I really like that. But yes, it speaks to.
Original. No one's ever thought that.
It is. Yeah. It is. But it does speak to the Leviathan of Thomas Hobbes. Life in a state of nature is poor, solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. We need civilization to paper over some of those cracks in nature where we just end up eating one another and getting eaten in our turn, and we can divide labor. But and so his illustration of the state was exactly if you look up, Oliver, Leviathan, Hobbes, and images, you'll see your concept articulated in the 17th century in England by Thomas Hobbes.
By a different rocker.
By a different rock god.
I really.
If you look for the guy, there we go. It's and so if you zoom in, if you put it up and zoom in, so if you see the top, is a man, and this is the state. It's a man made of men. So this is the idea of the crown. Well, this is Oliver. This is a picture of Oliver Cromwell, but is the Lord Protector. This is a man who represents the state, but also the state is represented as a body politic.
Yeah, like an Escher drawing of.
Yes, coruscating infinite regression fractal version of the state being the men and in the minds of the men. Oh, we're getting a call from Emre, our CTO.
Hello, I'm on stream.
Yeah, you're on stream. We're just discussing Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan of the 17th century. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. You need to coordinate how people are going to get medicinal supplies and stuff like that.
Oh, yes. I mean, so everyone, chloroquine. Look up chloroquine.
That's not good. It's talking about paracetamol and stuff. I'm sure there is some else, but what's going on? More stuff coming, or what's going on?
So apparently ibuprofen can actually make corona worse. So if you take any non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen or like codeine,
Yeah, speaking about what's going on with the stock,
they can make it worse. So don't take those if you've got.
Shit was coming. Can we find that out? Right.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks. Peace. That was Emric, our CTO. He's the next Satoshi, real blockchain wizard. He can code like nobody's business. If anybody needs coding, Emre's your man. Contact me. And so yes, the Leviathan is the body politic, and so yes, you really. But I like your idea that it's in the minds of men. It's not just their bodies.
Well, that's what nation is, right?
Yes.
You're brought up, you go to school, funded. Well, you have to go to school by law of the state. You go to school, which is basically provided by the state, and they drill it into you that you are British. They have a flag, a figurehead like the Queen, a national anthem, football. I don't know, whatever. But you're drilled in. You're conditioned to believe that you are part of this nation, sort of be British or French or whatever. But yeah, it's a psychological kind of holdover. You're just like your faith in money, your faith in the system, your fear of the law. All of this shit is the superstitious kind of things that control you. Yeah, I mean,
so I think that's a really powerful idea, Oliver. I think we should go away. And think about that overnight, and then we'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow with Nicholas Jackson O'Shaughnessy, Professor Nicholas Jackson O'Shaughnessy, world expert in study of propaganda at all the universities you can name: King's, Oxford, Cambridge. He works with MI5 and MI6 and all of the fun alphabet agencies. And he'll be with us tomorrow, now the universities are out, discussing propaganda, its history, current affairs, and future, and how it impacts on our time. And as he says, propaganda is the key dynamic of human history and of how we live today. And so with that, I thank all of you for joining us on this first In the Bunker New Athens live stream. And I'd like to thank Dan Kulupski, our resident historian, for his fine contributions. And thank you, Oliver, so much for producing this experimental show. There's Oliver. In spirit, if not in fact. And we'll see you tomorrow. That's all for me, Lorenzo Mefsert, founder of the New Athens. I'll see you again next time.